Hello, everyone, and welcome. And I'm joined here today by Hannah. Before we get started, Hannah, can you please introduce yourself, share your pronouns, and tell our listening audience a little today about who you are and the work that you do?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Wally. I am Hannah Voss, so my pronouns are they, she. I am a program manager in Skagit and Whatcom counties at Work Opportunities, which is a nonprofit that provides employment support to folks with disabilities in our community. And I've been in the field since 2016-ish, so coming up on about a decade, which I'm really excited about.
Fantastic. Hannah, in your presentation today, you shared some wonderful topics and information around how to support individuals of the LGBTQ plus and 2S plus community. Um, what I always find interesting is the topics are there, but why do you think it is so important for service providers and organizations to know this information and how to implement that work across their their community?
Yeah. I'll say I had an amazing experience happen while I was working on putting together some of the content for this presentation. As I was working, I'm a program manager, and so I had a couple of things going on at the same time. I needed to get in touch with someone who had asked for a job coach switch and ask them about what was happening there and what kind of support they needed. And then also I ended up after that phone call, I got a call from an additional client in another county who was looking for services. And in both of those conversations, I had asked the first individual who was switching job coaches, is there anything else that you want me to consider when I'm thinking about who would be the best job coach for you? And her response to me was, I'm proudly gay and I am married and I have a stepdaughter. And no offense to straight people or anything, but when you are gay and you have a gay job coach, there's just like you just get that zing there. So I would just really like a queer job coach if that's possible, something kind of like that. Um, and this person doesn't know about my identity, so they don't know that I can be additionally culturally sensitive. And then that next person who called was someone I had worked with, and they introduced themselves with a new name and let me know we had worked together, and they had transitioned and they were looking for services in a new county. And similarly, they said, it's really important to me that when I work with someone new, that this person knows how to serve gender diverse people. And I just thought it was really serendipitous that that happened at the same time that I was preparing this information. So neither of those folks know that I'm in the community, but both needed that kind of support. And so I knew that just not because I'm doing this work, but anybody in this field would need to be able to approach both of those situations with this kind of cultural sensitivity. And so I was really glad that I was putting this info together.
Yeah. Well, great. Thanks for that. The wording of cultural sensitivity and all those things around how we relate and connect to each other is so important in this work, right? We are given that privilege and responsibility of supporting individuals. What would you say, in your experience and the things that you've observed, would be maybe one of the things that organizations continue to maybe miss, or there's an oversight in terms of, they have the best intentions, they do the work to create the space, but what is something that you've noticed that continues to be something that is missed or that is not part of that conversation?
That's a great question. I think in employment, particularly, we're working to provide professional guidelines. And professionalism itself can be tricky because one person's definition of professionalism could align, eerily close to white supremacist ideals, I think, just frankly. And when we're thinking about our advocacy and the kind of employment support that we provide, not only just to people with disabilities, but in particular, this intersection of LGBT people with disabilities, you're going to see variance in what professional appearance, professional communication, um, professional relationships look like. So I think it's really important that folks consider just the bounds of professionalism and whether or not they're allowing folks the agency to
Mm.
explore those boundaries for themselves.
Yeah, that's such a great point for sharing that, Hannah. Um, because there we speak about how the individual is individual and how we create those individual spaces and conversations. And that leads into, such a powerful word, which is authenticity, right? We want to be authentic in how we show up and then support people to be authentically themselves. What are some things that you'd say, and I think you shared a little bit already and in your presentation, Hannah, but what are some critical things that organizations can do to create a welcoming culture so that someone can show up authentically, both as the people who are part of the organization and the people that they support?
Yeah. I think of some of the things that have happened over the years that I've been at work opportunities. And initially, when I started, I had a really interesting experience where a couple of days in, I had mentioned to a client that I went on a road trip with my wife, and that client went, "Oh, you're a lesbian! That's so exciting! I know lesbians. I have lesbian friends." And immediately after that interaction, I had a supervisor who got in touch with me and said, "Hey, I know that she reacted well, but I just wanted to let you know that there's support available, like in case anything happens and you're feeling uncomfortable or whatever, just know that the organization has your back in your identity. And we do expect that our participants are non-discriminatory to the folks that are working with them." So that just immediate sense of like, oh, somebody noticed that. Somebody who's not a part of the community even noticed that, which is great. And then, just some simple things, kind of like I mentioned throughout my presentation. And one of my biggest tips is being an everyday ally. So inviting folks to share pronouns or putting pronouns in email signatures, providing gender neutral bathroom spaces, putting up signage that is welcoming and shows that it's a safe place for LGBT folks, or all the different varieties of things that you can do to show that kind of commitment to allyship in a similar way to the way that we approach disability allyship.
Yeah. And that's wonderful, and those are fantastic tips. The other component here and that is a part of that conversation is the employer, right? When you are helping that individual and supporting that individual to find their place in the community through career. Um, when you find what you believe to be a good job match for the individual, and yet the employer is not the most supportive or even created that space or safe space, what is the conversation you have with employers, and at what point do you say, is this going to be supportive for my individual? So the conversation with employers, and then how do you then discern or decide that that is not the path you want to pursue? If that's ever come up or the conversations around that.
Yeah. I have to think about it. I think we're lucky in Washington State and in Whatcom County in particular, which is the majority of where I've practiced services. We're pretty recent to Skagit County, which I think is going to give us a little more variety. Bellingham tends to be a really like open area for queer folks, and so I don't know that we've run into it a ton. Um, I think when we're working with LGBT folks in particular, we're seeking out those places that are really loudly supportive so that we just don't run into it that much. Um, yeah, I think that's kind of the method, but I think unfortunately there's potential that where we're moving and our current atmosphere in society that folks are going to run into that. And so when I think about what I would say to an employer or how I would approach it, it's kind of that like general review of their harassment and like harassment and discrimination policies and see if they have anything specifically outlined for LGBT folks. Or if there is somebody within that workplace that you happen to know who has disclosed their identity, you might check in with that individual and see if they've ever had a supportive conversation or not. There's certainly different ways to go about it. And I think it also really depends on the person you support and their level of independence. They may be able to observe for some of that and then do some collaboration with you to figure out who the best person might be to approach or what kind of escalation policy they have and who's involved in that so that then you can make those connections and really find the specific information about the folks within the community that you're supporting.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Hannah. Language and we use terms a lot, right, that are important. We talk about pronouns and non-binary and gender non-conforming. And there are many things, and also as our terminology and understanding grows, and what are ways that people can better inform and educate themselves, whether it be resources or um, approaches? And you talked about some of those tools, but beyond that, there are some. And the reason I asked this question, Hannah, is that sometimes people don't know where to go. They want to be, and they don't know the first things to start. So, what would be maybe the first two things you would say to someone who is really like, I want to do this, I want to be better, I don't know what to do. So, and from not to simplify, but what would be maybe two things that you could then say, or two points, pieces of resource that you could provide to individuals who want to be more involved, educated in the conversation?
Yeah. I think first is that there are going to be organizations and other advocacy efforts in your area locally that are working on this information already. And so your search engine is your best friend in terms of locating who is already doing this work in your area. Connect with those folks. I can think of like some national organizations like PFLAG, which is Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, or other different types of community organizations who can provide resources. And if you are nervous about asking somebody who occupies an LGBT identity a question that feels personally invasive, just go to the folks who are providing that information on a regular basis anyways, and you can ask those general questions without feeling like you're being invasive about a person's lived experience. um yeah, I think that's like really
Yeah.
the biggest thing someone can do.
So this is a very big question, and it's very, and there may be no right or wrong answers, but if you could, in your opinion and your perspective, Hannah, if you could change one thing or two, I'll give you that space, to improve services for members of the LGBTQ um, plus community and people with disabilities, what would that be?
Yeah. Mm, I would recommend that organizations or like support agencies who are providing this support um hire staff that are reflective of the statistics of how often you're going to see LGBT clients come in. About 40% of individuals with disabilities identify as part of the LGBT community. So, having a staff that's about 40% or more individuals with that lived experience is going to give you a lot of that kind of just natural context and alignment with advocacy around that identity.
Yeah. Is there anything that we haven't touched on today that you'd like to share with our listeners? What is there something that you feel like, hey, this is something I really wanted to share before we wrap up? What would it be?
Yeah, I think we are all experiencing a cultural shift in our society. And I want to encourage folks, especially who are a part of the LGBT community, but anybody who's also supporting the LGBT community, to take good care right now. Take good care of yourselves and take good care of each other. Check in with each other, be there for each other. Know that this community has seen all kinds of different environments and has thrived through all kinds of different environments. And that by providing that kind of support and advocacy, within the community and to the community, if you're not a part of the community yourself, you are doing the kind of work that wins and achieves, I think, historically over time. So we'll get there. We just got to hang in there and take care.
Yeah, well said. We support and advocate with each other, for each other, together. Um, and then finally, Hannah, how can people connect with you and learn more about your work?
Yeah, feel free to reach out to work opportunities. Our website is just www.work, opportunities. It's opportunities.org. At that website, we've got a general info but if you mention my name, you'll get connected with me. We also talk a little bit about some of the equity related work that we do on our website. So if you want to find out a little bit more about what's going on there, feel free to reach out. And thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to chat about a subject that's so closely held and passionate.
Well, thank you so much, Hannah, for sharing your thoughts, your insights, your experience. And thank you, everyone, for joining us in our Prides Learning Series. And be well.